Hello, everybody. Welcome to the World of Concacaf podcast. This is a special edition, reporting to you live from our news desk. This is our 2022, the year in Concacaf special edition episode. I am Eric Schmitz.
I'm Jonathan Slape.
And I'm Donald Wine.
And if Concacaf is anything, it's continually ridiculous. It finds new and exciting ways to surprise us and delight us. And 2022 was no exception. And we want to make sure we kind of run down all the nonsense that happened. We did this last year. I think it's a good tradition to keep up. So we're going to kind of go through the year in CONCACAF and recap everything notable that happened, especially the dumb shit, because that is what this podcast stands for, is the dumb shit that happens in CONCACAF, our beloved confederation. The first thing we want to do is, this is the first time we're truly recording since the passing of Grant Wahl. Grant Wahl passed away on December 9th in Qatar. He was on scene reporting at the World Cup like Grant Wahl would do. It turns out he had a health situation that it was a ticking clock. You know, there was something that was long building up to. And it's a tragic loss for the soccer community. It's a loss for us. Going back to the start of 2022 in January, Grant Wahl joined us on our podcast. He was gracious enough to give us hours of his time to sit here and talk about CONCACAF. I mean, our little podcast, he stopped all the things he was doing. He was very prolific. He had spent years working for Sports Illustrated with Fox Sports. He was contributing in numerous sources, but he had a burgeoning newsletter, grantwahl.com. His podcasts were always must listens. But he sat down with us and he talked about CONCACAF. He played fucking real team or fake team with us, which is just absurd. And I'm just like incredibly grateful for like what he has done for American soccer, because he was the voice, he was the authority for a long time before soccer became what it is today. Do you guys want to just share your thoughts on Grant?
I will say too, like you say, he came on the podcast and like took the time, but I think the other thing too is like he didn't just, I mean, he did a solid 45 minutes with us, but I think the other thing too is like he sat on the phone, like he sat on a Zoom with us for another like hour and a half.
Yeah, just bullshit.
And just telling stories. Grant loved CONCACAF and this federation, more than we did, and appreciated the eccentricities. He ran for FIFA president, and just like I think probably the biggest thing is like you hear, a lot of people have given their tributes now, but like his lasting legacy is just what a good person and caring human he was, and like what he meant, like what he wanted to see. He wanted to see the sport succeed, but he also wanted to see other outlets succeed as well.
I mean, we talked about that night where we recorded our year review with him, and then afterwards, it wasn't like he stayed on for an hour and a half out of obligation. He did it because he genuinely wanted to just chat soccer with us. And the only reason it was an hour and a half is because he had to cut it, quote, short, because he had another meeting that like he was 15 minutes late for, because he was so busy vibing with us about CONCACAF.
Yeah, I think he told us afterwards. I think he told us like after we recorded, he's like, "Hey, I got like 10, 15 minutes."
Yeah, he's like, "I got 10, 15 minutes." He blew through a whole meeting and was like, "Yeah, they're not. They don't need me right now." Then all of a sudden, he's like, "Okay, I actually do have to go." Like that was him though, and I mean, I knew him a little bit longer than you guys did. I met him through all our travels that we've done, and as you guys have seen, he was at AO events with us. He was, whenever we hit the road and went to other countries, he would come hang out with us because he knew, he loved soccer, and he knew that we loved soccer as much as he did. And he wanted to always be involved with that. And the last time I got to really hang out with him was in England for the women's game when the U.S. women played England back in October. We did a whole like bar crawl like all night long, and he hung out with us. He vibed with us. We were out till like 2 a.m, and then the next day he ended up going to Richmond and hanging out with Beard from Ted Lasso. Like he did those sort of things. He went places that we didn't think we could go, and at the end of the day, he came all the way to the other side of the world to hang with us. He went to the Caribbean to hang with us. Like he did a job, and that was a job he did completely outstandingly. And I'll say this as someone who also works in the college basketball side, he did so much for college basketball too. He was a big Kansas fan. He, for 2 decades, the stories that you saw when you got your Sports Illustrated issue, those cover issues, those were Grant Wahl. There wasn't anybody else. He was
what was the column that he had he had that like almost like a newsletter column. It was like a back and forth. I'm trying to remember who the other writer was.
I don't remember, but it was, I mean,
I know what you're talking about.
Every issue there'd be like, college basketball, baseball, football, and then like in the corner they'd be like soccer. But he made sure that there was something soccer related in every single issue of Sports Illustrated because he knew it was important, and he pushed them to make him do soccer full time because he knew it would work. The reason why we have this podcast is because someone like him showed that you could do a podcast on just soccer and get away with it, right? Like in a way, like we're kind of getting away with it. And also, again, like we were what, 6 months into this thing, and he was like, hey, we reached out via DM, and he was like, yo, I'd love to come on. I've wanted to talk with you guys for a long time about Concacaf. I was on his show a couple times, and it was just a sad like time. All the stuff that's happened so far, the number of times that all of us and people out there have just kind of said, damn, I wish I knew what Grant would have said, would have written,
especially
would have written about all this stuff.
The cup final too, like with Grant loving Argentina as much as he did, having lived there for a little bit. Like I definitely, especially after that game, like I would have loved to have read
his thoughts
on that game.
Yeah. And I mean, I go back and I had casually met Grant a number of times, but when we were in El Salvador for the first away World Cup qualifier, we're sitting in the hotel before the game, and Grant walks into the lobby and just starts shooting shit. And Donald, you like tore out, like, hey, I don't know if you know Eric, like we do the CONCACAF podcast together. He's like, he knew what you were talking about. He knew our podcast. Yeah. And it's like, if you're a listener, we really appreciate you because there aren't quite too many of you. But he knew what was going on and he appreciated what was going on. And it's like Grant Wahl, like the voice of soccer in America, was in tune with what we were doing at that early stage. And then he's like, yeah, definitely, I would love to come on and be so gracious with his time. And
that was like in everything. That was in everything Grant did. Like I know Ben Wright, who's editor at Broadway Sports Media, he talked about the Canada game in Nashville. That was really the first time he'd got a chance to meet Grant in person. And like Grant had a 6-7 minute conversation about like some of the pieces Ben had written in the past, and he was like, I had no idea that this guy had read anything that I had ever written, but it was in tune with what was going on. And
I will also say, going back to the conversation we had with him about a year ago, if you remember, it was a very different time that we were in, and we were still kind of in the midst of COVID. And I remember him when he got off, he said he had to get off of a meeting that he was late for, but also his wife, Celine Gounder, Dr. Celine Gounder, was also on a call, and he's like, someone has to kind of look after the dog, right? Like they have to kind of, we have to balance these responsibilities. And I remember we were kind of like, hey, from us to you, like tell your wife that she is doing great things. And he didn't need to be told that, because you could tell how proud he was of the work that she has been doing over the last, especially over, throughout her career, but especially over the last couple of years, being kind of one of the main voices that need to be listened to when it comes to the COVID pandemic. And I know, like she joked that she was not in the soccer world, but he very much brought her world into soccer and made it where it was a priority. He did that with a lot of people. He did that with his friends. He did that with people he didn't know. He did that with 3 guys who were starting a podcast where we're bullshitting over some region because of vibes. Like he did that. And I think that's what's going to be missing for a very long time from this soccer space that we have created, is that he's not going to be there to be kind of that glue guy, that guy who is everyone's friend. And I consider him a friend. And I'm honored by the fact that he considered me a friend, and that he would, again, at the drop of a hat, say, hey, I'll jump on your podcast, or hey, I'll chat for you for 10 minutes, or hey, can you help me with this thing? I need some help, and I think you have the best perspective. It was such an honor to be to have Grant among us, and also just how genuine he was. It was something that was across the board. Everyone really appreciated how genuine he was.
Yeah, and I mean, Grant did so much, not just for American soccer, for women's soccer. Like, he was one of the first people to actually be treating it equal. He was the one that was referring to the World Cup as the men's World Cup, because you do need to differentiate that now. And he did so much for, with all the stuff going on in Qatar, he was very focused on doing coverage toward all of the nonsense going on around this World Cup. He was the one going after the corruption, especially in our region. LGBTQ rights, like he was a voice for so many people, and he really empowered a lot of communities in our game. And the fact that we were privileged, the fact that he spent so much of his time talking about CONCACAF. I mean, he was at every U.S. World Cup qualifier. He was the one going to all of those away games. Like, he's the one with stories on St. Vincent and going to Antigua and Barbuda. And what country was he held? Did he get held up in?
Honduras.
Yeah. I mean, he's got stories from everything. And it's like, that's what we're here doing. Like, we're trying to take Grant's lead and really embrace telling the story of our region. And we wouldn't be doing this without him. And I'm very grateful that he took the time to come on our podcast and talk about how much he loved covering the things that we're talking about. Whenever we close up shop and stop doing this thing, which, man, I don't know if we're ever going to get through all these countries. We don't start doing laser focuses more. But literally probably the number one highlight that we're ever going to have is the fact that Grant Wahl came on our podcast.
Absolutely.
So I know it's been some time, but our thoughts are still with Dr. Gounder and his family and his friends and everyone who knew him, because he was awesome. So in honor of Grant, we're going to dedicate this to him. Let's talk about some CONCACAF nonsense. And that is 2022. So let's just start by recognizing our champions of CONCACAF. First off, and Grant would appreciate it, we're going to start with the CONCACAF Women's Championship, the rebranded CONCACAF W Championship. This one, surprisingly, won by the United States of America. You might detect a pattern here in these champions. The interesting thing about this year's CONCACAF W Championship, other than the rebranding, they've kind of tried to make an event. It was held in Mexico, which is always nice when CONCACAF
gorgeous Monterrey.
Gorgeous Monterrey, just like the vibes were immaculate. I wish the crowds showed up more for the non-Mexico games.
And we talked about why the ticketing and all that.
Yeah. No, there's definitely some nonsense around that, but it's good not only for the U.S. to go play somewhere else in CONCACAF, but just for CONCACAF to Mexico theoretically got a little bit of a bump from playing at home. In the end, they did not get said bump. They ended up finishing dead last in their group.
They got bumped out.
Yeah, they got bumped out. But the U.S. wins the final 1-0 on an Alex Morgan penalty over Canada. You hate to see it. Sorry, Canada. Finished in second place. Alex Morgan winning the golden ball. Canada winning fair play award, which makes sense. They're so nice. They get that fair play award. But the key thing about this tournament is it was a dual qualification tournament. So it qualified teams not only for the Women's World Cup in 2023, but also the Summer Olympics and the future Concacaf W Gold Cup. So heading to the World Cup out of this tournament, the United States, Costa Rica, Canada, and Jamaica. Those are the ones that get automatic bids. 2 other teams qualified for the Interconfederation playoffs. Also, the United States also qualifying for the Summer Olympics by winning the tournament. There will be a playoff for the second CONCACAF spot after this tournament. Guys, do you have any thoughts on the CONCACAF W tournament? Your memories of it?
I mean, not really that we haven't covered already.
Also, a reminder that Haiti and Jamaica are in the play-in game or the playoff for the World Cup. It's Haiti at least.
Yeah, let me double check that. We are, we're doing it live here.
Yeah.
It is Jamaica and Canada are in the Olympic playoff, the Interconfederation playoffs for the Women's World Cup. It is Haiti and Panama representing
Haiti and
CONCACAF.
Panama. Thank you.
And those are taking place in February 2023.
Mhm.
So we'll get more details on that then. So that was the senior championship. Lots of other women's tournaments. The U20 women's championship took place. That was won by the United States of America. The U17 women's championship took place. That was won by the United States of America. The U15 girls championship took place, and that was won by the United States of America. Guys, do you see any connection between all of these women's tournaments in CONCACAF?
They're the same
United
person.
Yeah, same person.
Yeah, same person. It's like the whole family, like the older
It's
sisters,
the
younger
Spider-Man
sisters.
meme.
Yeah. But on the women's side, we had all those championships. No real international championships for the men outside of the 2022 CONCACAF U20 championship
And the World Cup, but
yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. I'm talking about inside CONCACAF. The U20 championship, I'm talking just tournaments.
Yeah.
The U20 championship won by surprise, the United States of America. Huge win over the Dominican Republic in the final, 6-0 scoreline. The key thing here is the Dominican Republic is in the final. So the Dominican Republic qualifying for the U20, not only for the U20 World Cup in 2023, along with Honduras and Guatemala, the Dominican Republic qualified for the Summer Olympics for the first time ever. So huge, momentous occasion for the Dominican Republic program.
And the U.S. qualified on the men's side for the Olympics for the first time since 2008. Normally, a U23 tournament, they gave qualification to the U20s, and for the U.S., it actually, that was the lucky charm because the U23s had not gotten it done since 2008, and finally, the U20s are the ones that send them to Paris.
Yeah, so the United States making their 14th Summer Olympics appearance in 2023, Dominican Republic making their first. So congrats to the Dominican Republic there. On the club side, we had our big men's club tournaments. First, the Champions League. Big story in the CONCACAF Champions League. The Seattle Sounders winning the title. Long time coming for an MLS team to win. Seattle getting the victory over Pumas in the final. It's a 2-leg final. They ended up winning 5-2 on aggregate. Is this a huge moment for Major League Soccer winning this?
In this current iteration, yes. I think it is worth mentioning that a lot of people are saying, it's the first time that the U.S. has won, an MLS team has won the CONCACAF Champions League. That is not true. It's the first time under this iteration, which Donald's DC United had won a previous iteration.
He's shaking his head.
You didn't see the
you
thumbs
damn
up
Skippy,
and the
we
finger.
did.
Yeah. But
LA Galaxy
No.
1-1 too.
Yeah. But I think it is worth mentioning that, we did see, of this iteration, it's something that has been tried to attempt multiple times. We even got close to an all MLS final. But It was still, I think it's really big for the league and for, just in this country. I think it just as a whole for a non-Mexican team to win it. I think it's like, I think that's even the even bigger story is like it's someone that's not Mexico.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, when you look back at all of this, right? Like you just mentioned all of the tournaments that the U.S. won on the international level. Leagues Cup has been won by the United States. The CONCACAF Champions League won by the United States. Even the like little Campeones Cups that they do between MLS and League MX have been recently won by the United League. No, not Leagues Cup. The Campeones Cup, the one where the winner of each, that was won by the United States. The All-Star game was MLS versus League MX All-Stars. That was won by the United States. So the United States has been on a little run here that's unprecedented. Literally, with the exception of CONCACAF League, which I know you're going to get to, every single tournament has been won by a team from the United States in the region. And I think that we even go back to the Gold Cup and Nations League, a lot of them being won by teams from Mexico, I think is a big boom for the United States. And I think we even discussed whether that's good for CONCACAF. The answer is hell yeah, it's good for the CONCACAF to have non-Mexico teams win it, but also to have a program from top to bottom dominate a region. It just shows the quality that has improved here in the United States and also across CONCACAF, because it wasn't easy for these United States teams to win. It wasn't like they had cakewalks. A lot of these teams had to struggle against upstarters like Canada or again, like you mentioned, the Dominican Republic and in Haiti and Jamaica. There's a lot of teams out there that have been doing pretty well. That's only going to help the region grow.
Sure. But you briefly mentioned, I think, the main course of this whole list of champions, CONCACAF League, the final edition of the beloved CONCACAF League, CD Olympia. If there was ever a team that deserved to go off as all-time CONCACAF League champions, it's going to be CD Olympia. Of course, CD Olympia had been excommunicated from the previous edition of the tournament over the whole Ronnie Brunswijk thing. They come back, the first champions of CONCACAF League and the final champions of CONCACAF League. As CD Olympia wins, beating Alajuelense in the final in 2 legs. Actually a dramatic final. Really intense gameplay, and winning 5-4 on aggregate, thanks to getting a 2-2 result away in the final match. So Olympia wins the final CONCACAF League and retains that title in perpetuity. So the Honduran squad is the only non-American team to win a CONCACAF title in 2022. So those were like the tournaments we had. The other things going on, there's a World Cup. So in the start of 2022, we had the conclusion of World Cup qualification. Canada ended up finishing first on the table and declaring themselves champions of CONCACAF for some reason, even though that's definitely not how this works. They finished first. Mexico finished second and qualified for the World Cup yet again. And U.S. finished third. And then Costa Rica qualified for the World Cup as well after finishing fourth and going to the playoff and getting a victory there. We had 2 windows of 3 matches in January, February, and then March of 2022. What are your favorite, like what do you take most out of like how qualification ended? What do you think was the big moment?
I think from the CONCACAF standpoint, I think it's great for the region that they had so many spaces in doubt on the last day. Mm-hmm. Like on the final match day. I mean, the United States qualified on the final match day. Mexico had to qualify on the final match day. Costa Rica, I believe, had to at least qualify fourth with the win over the United States on the final match day. So there's a lot of if you think about it, like a lot of people, when you look at like EPL or even MLS, you have decision day where you want a lot of games to have some action and something for rooting interest for neutral fans to watch. And they had that. So people who were interested in these games, they had a lot of games where the scores would have affected standing. So I think that was good. And I mean, I will say it is good to have, Canada back into the top full of the region, because it's something that's been missing for a long time. And for the United States and for Mexico, they want that third rival that's the North American neighbors to the north. But I do think it was interesting. I think we've talked about this a bunch. I think Jamaica really was the loser here because of COVID, they weren't able to get a lot of their players. But if they were, I think they're going to the World Cup other than one of these teams.
Jonathan,
Yeah.
what about you?
I mean, I think for me the lasting impression of this World Cup of 2022 World Cup qualification is that match against the US Mexico in Estadio Azteca, for what will probably be, or is the last time we'll see a World Cup qualifier between these two teams, maybe ever, but at least for the next 5 years, 5-6 years. So, I mean, I think seeing those two teams go at it in such a storied place is probably like my highlight of those like last 6 matches of World Cup qualifying.
Yeah. So Canada finishes first, claims that they're champions of Concacaf, even though that's not how any of this works. Shout out to
They've updated their Twitter too. I actually just looked. They claim a men's championship in 2020.
What? Wait, what?
Yeah. I don't understand it. But
Did they win? Did they win the first round of qualifying? Is that what they were talking about?
I'm guessing. Yeah, men CONCACAF champs 1985, 2020.
That's weird. Fucking Canada. Get your shit together. But do want to shout out Canada's Kyle Larin, who did finish first in goal scoring. He won the Golden Boot of the octagonal. Probably the last time we'll see an octagonal like this. Just because of the
I wouldn't go so far because of the expansion to 48 teams in the World Cup. The region is going from 3.5 to, I want to say, 8. They're getting 6,
yeah,
and then 2 more teams will go to the big new World Cup playoff. So if you think about it, the United States, Mexico, and Canada aren't going to need to qualify in 2026. So that leaves 5 spots to be determined, whether they be automatic or the 2 that go to the playoff. I don't think you do that through a hexagonal. You don't say, hey, 5 out of 6 are going, and I don't think they're going to split up in the groups. They may do another octagonal. It might. At least it's a format that's on the table.
Hex.
I mean, yeah,
possibly.
I could see them breaking it up because remember, because of COVID, we had these 3-match windows. I don't think they're ever going to do that again because I think there's too many complications of having 3 matches in a single international break, and because we're not living in the same scenario we were when they had to set up the schedule, I don't know if they would ever try to do that again.
Well, the 3, I think you could still have a hex without having, or I'm sorry, an octagonal without doing the 3-match windows. I think you can still do it with 2-match windows because if you think about it, other regions have, multiple groups, or like in the case of CONMEBOL, it's just one big table, and they still do 2 matches per window.
Yeah, I think the only thing is I think that CONCACAF is going to want to have more teams involved later. They've talked about that multiple times, and I think the only reason that was even different it wasn't that this time was the fact that COVID and a compressed schedule really kind of threw a lot of wrenches in a lot of people's plans. But
yeah, for sure. But that was the end of qualifying. But that was qualifying for the World Cup. We had the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar. Donald and I both attended. It was a shit show. We'll talk more about that later. But CONCACAF did not have the best showing. Just running through the groups. The US was the only one that made it out of the group stage. They finished second in Group B. Mexico finished third in Group C. Costa Rica finished 4th, last in Group E. And then Canada making their return to the World Cup for the first time since 1986. They finished last in Group F, not winning a game. I do want to shout out
31st in the final standings.
Yeah, so not only did Canada finish 31st in the final standings, just ahead of Qatar, who finished 32nd. Love to see it. I do want to point out, I was doing research for this in FIFA World Cup records and statistics. Of the 80 nations that have made a World Cup in the history of the World Cup, Canada is 77th out of 80. They are 0 wins, 6 draws, minus 10 goal difference. They're only ahead of Haiti, the DR Congo, and El Salvador as the worst teams to ever perform in a World Cup. So way to go, Canada. Good to have you back. As I said, the U.S. advanced out of the group stage. They faced the Netherlands in the round of 16, where they fell 3-1. Nothing else interesting happened with that national team in the World Cup. So that's the results of the year. We're going to take a quick break. Let's just reset. We talked about what happened as far as like who won stuff. Let's talk about the bullshit after this. So we'll take a break. All right, we're back. Gentlemen, I think it's time. We did this last year. This might be the most important thing we do in this year in review episode. It's time for us to give out the Ronnie Brunswijk Memorial Concacaf Man of the Year Award. Now, as you know, legend of the podcast, legend of Concacaf, Ronnie Brunswijk, the vice president of Suriname, who decided, I'm going to start for the Intermongo Tapos 2021 CONCACAF League match. Dude rolling out 61 years of age into the starting 11. Ronnie Brunswijk handing out cash after the game.
Can we get an Intermongo Tapo jersey set, please? Intermongo
Ronnie,
Tapo. Like,
Ronnie, hit us up.
Ronnie,
hit us up.
You giving out cash. We're not even asking for cash. We're just asking for, I'm a 2X. He's like the extra medium. He's an XL. At Concacaf.
Put in the mail at Concacaf. Done. But the Man of the Year award goes to the most Concacaf person of the year. And Ronnie Brunswijk obviously ran away with it in 2021. But in 2022, we have to decide who is the most CONCACAF person of 2022. Jonathan, do you have anyone in mind?
I do have someone. You're going to notice a theme throughout earlier in the podcast, throughout the rest of it. And that is going to be shit talking Canada.
We do it well.
You talked a lot of shit for a country that hadn't been to a World Cup since 1986. And one of the things that CONCACAF has been known for in the past is good goalkeeping. Keylor Navas, Casey Keller, Brad Friedel,
Matt Turner,
Tim Howard.
I'd even say Memo Ochoa,
Memo Ochoa, Andre Blake.
Oh, yeah.
But you know who's not in that list? Milan Borjan, the sweatpants wearing joke of a goalkeeper for the Canadian men's national team. And for those that maybe didn't watch the Canadian games, I challenge you to go back and watch. And I would say probably 90% of the goals that Canada concedes, you will find yourself going, what the fuck was Borjan doing there? Like, he's not looking at the goal. He's flapping at the ball and giving it away. And for a guy that thinks of himself as this elite goalkeeper and talks a lot of shit himself, seeing him easily be the worst player, I don't think it is a stretch to say he was the worst player at the World Cup. just warms my heart. So for that, I give Milan Borjan the Ronnie Brunswick Concacaf Man of the Year for 2023 or
Listen,
2022, I should say.
we're I mean, this is just a nomination process. We're talking about the nominees and we're going to
Oh.
award it. Borjan, worthy nominee. I think he did ball out in the win over the US in January. That dumb bullshit game in Hamilton. But I think that yes, he earned it. I think the award also should stay in Canada, but I'm going to bring up a different candidate. And my candidate is the man who led the way, and that's John Herdman. Now, John Herdman had a wonderful qualification cycle. He led Canada to the top of the table, their first World Cup since 1986. And then he goes to the World Cup off of this great performance, expectations sky high. Everyone is excited. And Canada lays a fucking egg in Qatar. No goals. They scored 2 goals in the tournament. One of them they didn't even score. Alphonso Davies got one, and then they got an own goal.
Shout out Morocco.
Yeah. And then he goes before their game against Croatia, goes and starts talking shit about beating Croatia. He said F Croatia, and it got in the papers. And funny enough, Croatia beat their ass in that game. And it's like, dude, chats shit and gets slapped. And I think having so much progress and yet still looking like the asshole, I think John Herdman is my nominee for the Ronnie Brunswick CONCACAF Man of the Year.
So I absolutely love the John Herdman pick. I absolutely love the Milan Borjan pick. And I'm going to tell you guys, I have no idea who to choose on this. Like, there are pros for both. There are no cons for either. They are both worthy. So I can't pick this. I know my vote is the one hanging in the balance. So I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to have to flip a coin. In fact, I'm looking around here. I don't have a coin, but I do have Siri. So what's going to happen is I'm going to assign heads to John Herdman and tails to Milan Borjan. And I'm going to ask Siri what's going to happen.
Oh, God.
You guys can listen in. Hey, Siri. Flip a coin. It's heads.
Heads?
It's
John
heads.
Herdman.
John Herdman is our Ronnie Brunswick Memorial CONCACAF Man of the Year for 2022. Congrats to John. It's been a long rise from being the Canadian women's coach to being the Canadian men's coach to winning this prestigious award. So shout out John Herdman. Shout out Canada for being.
You think they'll put this in their Twitter bio?
Yeah, they got to fit that in. The CONCACAF Ronnie Brunswick Memorial CONCACAF Man of the Year award. I mean, that goes on his resume for whenever he moves on. He'll get any job in the world now for anyone that's looking for bullshit. But
if he doesn't add this to his LinkedIn profile, I'm gonna be upset.
Yeah, better get that update, John. There's a lot of other dumb shit that happened. John Herdman did some dumb shit. Borjan did some dumb shit. But throughout CONCACAF, we had a lot of nonsense. So let's talk about that. First, just kind of going sort of chronologically. Cold weather games. This year, I think we saw something that we saw a little bit in 2022, but possibly the dumbest that could possibly be. So in January, World Cup qualifying, Canada was like, yo, we're playing the United States. Let's put the game in Hamilton, Ontario. And everyone's like, why the fuck would anyone go to Hamilton, Ontario? But they played the game there. So the U.S., Greg Berhalter, galaxy brain thinking, they're like, you know what? We really got to prepare for the cold weather We gotta, make travel easy. We're gonna play our 2 home games in Columbus, Ohio, and fucking St. Paul, Minnesota, in January and February. I don't know if you know anything about the U.S. climate, but it's a fucking dumb thing to do because it is cold as shit. Donald, you were at these games.
Mm-hmm.
How miserable was it?
So, the coldest game that I've ever been to, ever, and I've been to for the U.S., I've been to over 150 between the men and women. The coldest game I ever went to was the game in Columbus, Ohio, until I went to the game in Hamilton, Ontario. Then that was the coldest game that I'd ever been to. Until I went to the game in St. Paul, Minnesota. And not only was that game the coldest game that I have ever been to, that was the coldest game that anyone has ever been to, because it was the coldest game in the history of the Western Hemisphere. I think the only game on planet Earth that has been colder, an official FIFA friendly or match or whatever, I think the only one that's ever been colder was one in like Vladivostok, Russia, or something like that, somewhere in Siberia.
People got subbed out because they had hypothermia. Like let's just remember, like, people were were so cold. It was so cold there that they had to sub people off at halftime.
Remember the conspiracy theory? There was a
conspiracy theory that Matt Turner had gotten frostbite on his foot. For those that don't remember,
yes, that he had Blackfoot, like Mr. Deeds. Like that was how cold this game was. It was so cold that ice formed when you threw beer in the air. And when beer floated, you threw it in the air, it floated like snow flurries. And if it landed on your jacket and it froze, it became cotton. And then when you picked that cotton off, it became a hole in your jacket, because it was basically like dry ice attached to a jacket. That's how cold this thing was. It was so cold that the Honduras team was in Houston, and one of our buddies, Max, was on the flight with them, and they were group like 3 or 4, and they waited till group 9. And at group 9, they said, "Hell, last call. If you're going to Minneapolis, now's the time." And that's when the whole team was like, "For real, we got to go up here. All right, I guess we're getting on the plane." And they were not happy. This was a fun game that should never happen again.
I think there's a lot of Concacaf things you could say. This was fun. Let's never do it again.
Never do it again.
So yeah, a lot of dumb stuff. We're gonna stay in Canada with the next thing I want to talk about. So the dumbest goal ever. Well, the dumbest goal. It's honestly the Concacaf goal of the year. I don't know if you guys remember Atiba Hutchinson's worldie in San Salvador, World Cup qualifying in February. We're posting the video on our Twitter. If you haven't seen it already, you'll see it again. You're going to be like, "Oh, I remember this shit." It was ugly. Absolutely ugly. It just goes off him and up in the air and in. World Cup qualifying, that gets them 3 points in El Salvador. A massive result for Canada on their way to, advancing to the World Cup. So shout out Atiba Hutchinson. I swear we'll stop talking about Canada at some point here. Other dumb stuff that happened. So the U.S. beat Panama in the second to last qualifier in March, which got them close to clinching a World Cup berth. Did not clinch them World Cup berth. Fucking people handed the players a qualified banner to go up and say thank you, fans. Motherfuckers, someone is like, "Wait a minute, we're not actually qualified yet." So there's pictures of the guys holding up the banner and the players looking at it like, "Yo, this is wrong," and someone's snatching it up. Very Concacaf-y to not understand how standings work.
That was one of those things where everybody was like, "Oh no, we can't be a bad beat on Sports Center."
That is the night that we coined our catchphrase, "Concacaf is a vibes-based economy," because after the game, we were speaking as if I was convinced we were going to miss the World Cup over that. Like, we fucked up, and the vibes were going to be all wrong, and we were going to lose 6-0 in that last game because we put that stupid banner up. And we tempted fate, We survived. Great to see. On the dark side, we had in Liga MX, we had the riot in Querétaro. In our Mexico episode that we had where we were joined by John Arnold, we did talk about that. It appeared many people died in this. I don't know if we ever got true information. There, a lot of people just didn't see nothing, and that was in March. A lot of fallout from that. Very dark day for Concacaf.
I will say the Football Americas episode that Herc Gomez and Sebastian Salazar did on the Querétaro riot was phenomenal. In the sense that they detailed what happened, what they knew, what they saw, like, because I mean the videos are telling one thing, police were saying quite a different, and some of the intricacies of why that was occurring. I think they did they're always great, but I think they did a phenomenal job with that particular dark moment in trying to shed light on why it came to that and why that happened and how they can prevent something like that from happening again.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully it never does. In CONCACAF Champions League, other dumb stuff. AS Cavalry had to drop out of the CONCACAF Champions League because they couldn't get visas. The Haitian squad was not able to travel to their away games against New England Revolution. So they're like, yeah, we ain't going. So New England got to advance. Also very dumb. But in like the most important dumbness that we have in CONCACAF, we have the return of Nations League. And boy, it did not disappoint that June window.
No, it did not.
It did not disappoint. So just to run through some of the dumb shit that happened, we covered a lot of this already on the podcast. Our CONCACAF Nations League recap from the June window, you can still find it. We talk more in depth about it. The lights went out in the middle of the game between Trinidad and Tobago and Nicaragua. It just went out in the middle of the game. Very CONCACAF-y. Honduras.
Teddy Pendergrass.
Yeah. Honduras beat Canada in San Pedro Sula. The game was played in effectively a lake. I've never seen so much water on the ground in my life.
Until I'd seen so much mud.
Yes. Oddly enough, very shortly after the U.S.
same storm.
Yeah, same storm in El Salvador. The U.S. ended up stealing a 1-1 draw with El Salvador at Estadio Cuscatlan. And yeah, it was a mud pit. Like the pictures of Yunus Musa just like cake, like he was like wearing tan. It looked like he was wearing khakis from all the mud.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you basically could like
by Dockers,
and you could see the field was basically a heat map, and like you see it like sometimes like you see it like a games like snow games where you can see where everyone's been. However, this was just mud, and it was. I think the other crazy thing too is like to remember before the game. So the Estadio Cuscatlan had a concert there, like a night or two nights before. And so when the U.S. went and played or like practice on it for the walkthrough the night before, they were literally pulling out like long pieces of metal out of the grass.
Yeah. I mean,
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why we do what we do, is for that shit. Also in that Nations League window, Montserrat had to cancel a match away to Bermuda. Jamaica they revolted. They demanded their general secretary of the federation resign because they were so pissed about travel arrangements coming back from Suriname. Also travel related, Honduras got stranded in Miami traveling back from Curacao. They almost had to cancel the game in San Pedro Sula because Honduras could not get home. The game ended up getting played. They ended up losing, surprisingly. And I think my personal highlight, Nicaragua beat Bahamas 4-0. Bahamas only had 14 players on the roster for that match, and they subbed in their backup goalkeeper as a forward, as like a field player in that match. And it's just like the magic of Nations League. You cannot It cannot be defeated.
They knew how important it was, and they knew they had to do everything to get the result. And sometimes you have to throw in your backup goalkeeper.
Yeah. Did not work out for Bahamas. One other thing, I guess we got to go back to Canada. In that June window, so a lot of the teams that had qualified for the World Cup tried to get like prep friendlies together. Canada, for some reason, decided, you know what, let's schedule Iran, in Canada. I don't know if you've got any following of like geopolitics or something like that. Probably not a good idea to invite the Iranian national team to Canada. There's a lot of blowback about it. So Canada canceled that friendly and scrambled and was able to find Panama. They flew Panama up to Vancouver to play a friendly on like 3 days' notice. Panama shows up, and Canada's players strike over their CBA, and that game gets canceled. So Panama has to fly all the way from Panama all the way up to Vancouver to not play a game because Canada's players decided to strike. I feel like Canada is the star of 2022 in Concacaf.
Yeah, I mean the CS. I mean, I know this wasn't on the rundown, but like other Canadian cock-ups of the year. The fact that they were the only team that did not have new jerseys for the World Cup, and that was in large
because they didn't think they would make it.
Because they didn't think they were going to make it. Nike approached them and said, like, "You guys thinking about new jerseys for the World Cup?" Like, now we already need them. Isn't that just like the most Canadian mindset of all time? Like, yeah, we're not going to make it.
Yeah.
Can I amend my Ronnie Brunswijk award and just give it to Canada?
Trudeau, come get it. Come pick up the award. But speaking of jerseys, we had some rebrands, some new kits. I think the biggest news out of the Confederation in 2022 is that Jamaica signed a deal with Adidas that was starting in 2023. Massive move. Adidas had previously only been working with Mexico, and Adidas did some fire. Like we aren't ones to compliment Mexico here on this podcast. Mexico's World Cup kits were fantastic.
Oddly enough, didn't get to use their best one.
Yeah, they didn't even use the best one.
The New Mexico crest is pretty damn good too.
Yeah, so a lot of good branding for Adidas. I think it's great for the Confederation that they're recognizing the vibes that CONCACAF can bring. So Jamaica's get signed up, and spoiler alert, Costa Rica is rumored to be as well. So a lot of three stripes coming to CONCACAF. The other big kit thing was the blowback over the U.S. kits for the World Cup. I mean, they were kind of shitty.
Talking to two faces of the of World Soccer Shop's campaign.
Yes. I mean, I bought them, and that doesn't mean I have to like them.
I got paid to model them.
Yeah, we didn't get paid. We got
I mean, we got
gifts. We got compensated.
I mean, that's payment. It's on my LinkedIn profile.
Really? That's your picture?
No, I'm talking about like my other job is professional model.
Oh yes, modeling. I mean, if you get paid to do it, by definition, you're a professional.
I lost my NCAA eligibility.
That is true. Also, speaking of jerseys, shout out to friend of the pod, Stimulus Athletic, because they got St. Lucia's contract, so they're sponsoring St. Lucia. And word on the street is that they have, I believe, 2 more countries that we will see in 2023, including one that we might be heading to quite soon.
Oh, dropping nuggets, inside info on the podcast. This is a year in review. Let's kind of keep it on 2022 here.
Yeah.
So a lot of exciting kit news. Before we talk about, well, we don't want to spend too much time here rehashing 2022, but we got to talk about the things that were important to us. We'll get to our pod on the road reviews shortly, but we had a massive Jack Warner update in 2022. As you know, Jack Warner embattled former, I don't know, he did a lot of things in CONCACAF, former CONCACAF president, all around asshole. He had been fighting his extradition to the United States to face, face the music for what he did, all the scandals, and under his stewardship, and he lost his appeal. Jack Warner had a appeal with London's Privy Council. It's the highest court of appeal for many of the countries in the Commonwealth, and they unanimously dismissed his appeal. So right now, he at some point he's getting extradited to the United States to face charges from the Department of Justice over the corruption regarding the World Cup bidding processes. Jonathan, do you feel like Jack Warner's ever gonna actually face the music?
No, he's like a cockroach. He always manages to stay alive.
Yeah. Donald, what are your thoughts?
Jack Warner sucks.
Yeah. So we'll have more updates on Jack in 2023. But before we close this down and we put a bow on the year 2022, a World Cup year, 2023 is going to be a World Cup year as well. Women's World Cup. Excited. Australia, New Zealand. We going down south. We going down south. The reason we do this podcast to talk about all this stuff is because we just love Concacaf. We love traveling Concacaf. So we did a lot of traveling this year. So let's just talk about our favorite memories from our trips. First off, really like the highlight, the first, unanimous Concacaf pod on the road trip was to Canada. We all went to Hamilton for some reason. We're like, if you want like a true indicator of like the psychosis that we're dealing with, we went to Hamilton, Ontario in January for a soccer game. Jonathan, what was your highlight of that trip?
I mean, my highlight is, the reason I go to other countries is to sit in a hotel room with 3 other dudes, drinking Gatorade, drinking Molson, and eating a pizza while watching Hockey Night in Canada. That's why I travel. That's the culture that I desperately crave. But yeah, no, I mean, it was, it was Canada. My actual first trip to the Great White North.
It was white and it was north. I don't know about it wasn't that great.
It wasn't that great. But yeah, no, I mean, game sucked. There was the craziness. I mean, COVID was still a thing. That was just, it was madness is the best way to put that, because I mean, they canceled our tickets a week before the game and we all had to rebuy tickets. But yeah, no.
I've been to Hamilton or in or through Hamilton several times. So this was not the only episode I've had with Hamilton. Yeah. But it was definitely an interesting game. Also, that was the time where a lot of people decided, Canada fans, you need to calm it down a little bit. Like there was quite a bit of chirping after that game, and to their credit, they won the game. But they were chirping as people who we ain't slouches. Like if we want to throw hands can be thrown. We're very good at them. We're damn near the best in the world.
International export, isn't it? It's throwing hands.
Yes. We throw hands in 220 countries around the world. But no, it was fun. You guys trapped out of a whatever hotel next to a mall in Hamilton. We trapped out of a hotel across the street from a mall in Toronto. So it was a lot of fun. We had Thai food. We didn't have whatever it is you had. We had actually
we got pizza. We got pizza because that's the thing.
Pizza's dope. Yeah, pizza's dope. Yeah. You had to do that, and it was Jonathan's first time to Canada, so you had to give them the basics. We went with bougie.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing we did when we got over the border was stop at Tim Hortons. So we made sure that
Timmy Ho. That's what we did too.
Jonathan got what he deserved.
I mean, we had to see the frozen Niagara Falls, which was actually, I will say, as all the shit I talk about Canada, legitimately beautiful to see the frozen Niagara Falls. Like that was really cool.
The important thing to note as a local to that area, originally, is that you have to remember we were in Canada looking at America, so that's why it was beautiful.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you're looking at Canada from the US, kind of looks like shit. When you're on the other side looking, fantastic view. But just a little insider tip. Make sure you go check out Clifton Hill, stuff like that. So Canada was in January. Then in March, Mexico, the US Mexico game at Estadio Azteca. My first trip to Azteca. Now you've been there. What was
Yes.
like your highlight of like that Mexico trip this time?
Um, I think it was the fact that there was a lot of people that were there for the first time. Um, Mexico is a like top 5 city in the world. There's no
Yeah.
question about it, in my opinion. Um, and it was great to be down there. And I mean, there was just so many Americans that made the trip. I think that was cool. And it quite possibly could be the last time we go down there for a World Cup qualifier that is significant. So yeah, I think that was the key here, was that a lot of people took advantage of that and had a great time.
Yeah. No, it was my first trip to Mexico City. I absolutely loved it. Like I definitely want to go back and have time to like explore the city more. Definitely a really cool place. The vibes were immaculate. Um Azteca, it kind of sucked that it wasn't like full, but they had us US fans like kind of up by ourselves in the upper deck. Um, we weren't necessarily surrounded, so we weren't threatened. So like I do feel like missed out on a little bit. Well, the US didn't lose, so that was like very important to me. Um, so yeah, it was a good trip. And then also in that window, I went to Costa Rica. Donald had business. He went other side of the world for that
Mhm.
one. But I went to Costa Rica. I saw the US close out qualifying and qualify for the World Cup. San Jose was awesome. I had some banging KFC. That was really, really good. San Jose is a really cool city. I definitely want to get back to Costa Rica. People were super cool. I was dealing with a little sickness. So I didn't like really get after it too hard. But the stadium down there, it's worth checking out. Like it's a unique in Concacaf because it's actually like it. You could tell it was new and nice at one point, but like it's falling apart a little bit. Um, but really cool place to see a game. Very scenic. Donald, you went to El Salvador in June for Nations League, correct?
Mhm.
How was that?
Great. We were there a few days early because we had the game against Grenada that was in Austin, and then we left immediately from there. The game, that was a Friday night. The other game wasn't until Tuesday night, so we went down and rented a house on the beach, which was a lot of fun. Me and like 11 other people. So we enjoyed the weekend at the beach and did all that, and then we eventually went into San Salvador for the game. Again, it was the mud pit. It was a monsoon during the day, but again, the El Salvador was a fun trip. It was a fun trip the first time we took it. It was great to be there for multiple days. I can't tell you how many pupusas I had, because that number was over 100, and that's when I stopped counting. It was a lot of fun. It was a great fun trip.
I'm really jealous. I had massive FOMO for that. San Salvador's a really cool city. Yeah, and it's Nations League, so like I was devastated to miss out on his history. And then really, well, I guess you went to England as well, England and France for the women's games.
England and
Uh,
Spain.
Spain, Spain, France, same thing. It's not CONCACAF. No one gives a shit. You know. Anything to note out of that?
Yeah, I mean, it was my first time in England, in London specifically. It was a blast. I had a blast. And Spain I've been to multiple times. We'll talk about our Spain trip briefly. But that was just the latest one. Pamplona was the first time there. Very interesting city, a lot of history behind it. Very small, so I was able to kind of walk around and do it all in a day. The women played terrible at both of those games, so it was that left a sour taste, but it was great to get there, and I would have done it again. I think in Pamplona there was 8 of us, American fans in the stadium, and we were all together, so that was
That's
a lot of fun.
awesome. Nice. And then finally, the the main event of the year, the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar. I went down, you went. Um, we did a whole recap episode telling all of our stories from that. It was soccer fire fest. It was a magical World Cup. It was an experience unlike anything we'll ever see again, and that's a good thing. Um, what was your favorite part of that trip to Qatar?
I think my favorite part of the trip, that's a good question. I think my favorite part of the trip, besides Nando's,
Oh, yeah.
um, was honestly, it was probably the ship. Like being able to vibe with so many different uh fan bases on the ship was a lot of fun. There, I mean, we had just about everybody represented on the ship, and every time there was a game and somebody won, there was somebody celebrating
Yeah.
at one of the bars. So I think that was cool. That was the most unique thing of this World Cup, is that everyone was in one place.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, but obviously besides Nando's, um, for me, it was night before outside. I should say it was not losing to England. That was very important. Um, but after the night before party before US England, US soccer had their fan HQ night before us. Afterwards, after we had consumed many Budweisers in a country that allegedly couldn't drink in, after consuming many Budweisers, just sitting outside at a Papa John's store with fans from England, Argentina, Mexico, just sitting around chatting, talking shit to each other. That was the World Cup, and it's just like dumb shit like that. That's why you want to travel.
Honorable
Uh,
mention, Concacaf.
oh yes, Concacaf. How could I forget? Like, shout out Concacaf for that that concept. Like, honestly, every major CONCACAF event should have a CONCACAF A in that city. I think it'd be great for the brand, for the region, and great for the people of whatever city that is to realize, like, oh shit, CONCACAF, this is awesome. Um, and if you go back and listen to our episode, you'll hear all about me and Donald setting a world record in Madrid. Never been done before.
Never.
4 games.
Can never be beaten.
One day, 4 games, 4 bars. Can't never be topped. Yeah, that about wraps it up. Any final thoughts on the year 2022 in CONCACAF?
It
I
was a
mean,
wild.
if
Go ahead.
anything about 20, like, I mean, we know that 2023 is shouldn't be just as wild, if not more, based on the number of things happening this year. But yeah, no, looking forward to doing it all over, and you can go ahead and book the first 3-person pod on the road of the year. Will be Grenada.
Oh yeah, we're gonna be recording live from Grenada. I'm calling it. I'm saying it now. We're doing it. We did our live pod from the CONCACAF 2023 live from Grenada.
It's happening.
I got the
And
video
just
equipment now.
yeah.
There we go.
And shout out to everybody who has followed us over the last year. Just all the fans, all the patrons that we've gained over the last year. I know we launched our Patreon this year, so that was pretty cool. We launched our merch store. Shout out to Eric for putting that together. And so yeah, it was a great year for soccer, and there was a lot of soccer to go around, and we're just really, really honored that you guys stuck with us through all of it.
Yeah, no, I mean 2022 was a hell of a year. Um, I mean, World Cup qualifying, there's nothing like it. Nations League, there's nothing like it. The World Cup, there's nothing like it. This podcast, there's nothing like it. So, really appreciate all the support you guys have given us. Make sure you're checking out our merch store and grabbing your World of CONCACAF stuff. Um, but yeah, exciting stuff ahead in 2023. We're going to do some laser focuses coming up. We've been talking about doing the St. Vincent episode for years. It seems like we're gonna do it. We're gonna talk about St. Vincent because it needs to happen. But yeah, we'll kind of wrap this up here. Since it's the year end, do just want to shout out. Thank you, Donald. Thank you, Jonathan, for going on this journey with me. I want to also thank Jonathan's brother Jeffrey for our theme music. We have the best theme music in all of soccer podcasting. Thank you to Leah Voigt for our beautiful artwork, which you can now buy on shirts and other merchandise apparel items. Make sure you grab your bucket hat for these upcoming Nations League games, and keep supporting the podcast. So,
And thank you, Eric.
Oh,
Thank you,
yeah.
Eric.
Yeah, no, I this is a passion project, and I still have passion for Concacaf. So we're gonna forge ahead and keep covering this beautiful confederation, because in honor of Grant, we got to make sure that we're carrying on the tradition of, embracing what we are as a region. So thanks for listening. We'll see you in 23.